Greetings. Guten Tag, Talafalava. Let's catch up again. Right, the Snow Gang Club congregation. Welcome to my so-called YouTube channel. YouTube, Dr. Snow Brown Productions. Link to the CKCTV Facebook or my private kingdom. Private Meek Baby Brown Monarch Kingdom. Welcome. So what am I going to talk to you about now? What does it say? Preach about now. As a meek natural master. For starters, let me remind you again that the Mongol Mob Apart Association is a present gang. That's great. They are they are part of the New Zealand Police Force. That is correct. They were established back in 1962. And of course, and it looks like the KKK was the ones that got them started, the ones that got them established back in 1962. This would explain why during the Dawn raids, the police were raiding the so-called coconuts or the so-called Samoan communities' addresses early in the hours of the morning, and taking their so-called German Shepherd dogs or whatever to search them. You know, there is a similarity with that protocol. The Nazi soldiers. That's correct. During World War II, if you all remember and recall, the Nazi soldiers, the SEC, the Gestapo police, that's correct, were raiding also the addresses of Germans and even Jews, but more so Germans, back in Deutschland during the 1945-19 World War II epidemic, or pandemic, at that time, pandemic, where they were using dogs. So it's a very military type, it's a military kind of strategy protocol. Yes, right. To raid somebody's home using a dog, that's great, in this case, a German Shepherd, to track them down, well, to hunt them down, of course. How convenient that is, that the government of New Zealand was so racist that they went and, put their racist policies, that's correct, for the so-called police officers now that I am now convinced were actually KKK members, were either KKK members or they were KKK associates to the new established first criminal organization ever established in 1962. During that time was the Civil Rights Movement. Get this. There in America, that's great, the KKK organization or community was established during the time when slavery was being declared as illegal now. There was a prohibition, the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of America at about 1807 or around about beginning of 1800. And this was way before 1840. That's right, the signing of the treaty over here was declaring and making, slavery in America now an illegal, a prohibition, illegal to be illegal, declaring it illegal. And that no one was to practice such a depraved, satanic, demonic, so-called barbaric, protocol or such a phenomenon. That's right. So about the same time, then the KKK decided, and they would have been the most racist, arrogant, white Americans. That's great. Didn't want their so-called, their privileges to suddenly end the community as being a white race. That's correct. The privilege of where they were able to control a large group of African Americans and practice, and enjoy all their privileges, as being, superior than the black race and the brown race, was sadly now being undermined and under threat. And has come even under fire because slavery was now being outlawed in America. So then, of course, the KKK community and the KKK association or organization got established right about the same time when the so-called slavery was outlawed in America. So that by the 1924s, 1920s, KKK organization also was the first to become, disbanded for heinous crimes like murder and rape and whatnot there in America. So then they decided if they were going to get disbanded there in America, they needed to, expand. They needed to expand their so-called horizons and territory. That's great. So where did they go to next? To start up a new KKK organization. To spread their so-called, their so-called bad news everywhere. To plant and sow and cultivate their so-called extremist group, white superior group. Well, they came here to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Right about that time, right about 1962, in the 1960s, during the civil rights, crisis there in America, some of their members, they came and established, in fact, they not only established this first, they assisted and gave their support and blessings for the Mongol Mob Association to be established in this country in 1962. But then the KKK then started off as well about the same time. That's correct. You get it? That's correct. About the same time. So that's why the New Zealand police force is racist and is arrogant and do apply KKK harmful protocols and even and have adopted as well military type sort of protocols, harmful protocols like Nazi protocols, where you're using dogs to raid people's addresses. I mean, they only use German Shepherds to raid, say they're searching for drugs and weeds and contrabands there at the customs or at the airports. But here in the 1970s, during the Dawn raids, while they were now using it, to hunt down the coconuts or the overstayers. Pretty nasty. And yet they would never do that to any of the so-called Maoris and little Pakeas in this country, unless they're part of gang organizations. That's great. So what am I also trying to put forward to all of you? More so the citizens in this country, because it is a racist country, and it is prejudice. You see how, I've never been part of this criminal organization, but the treatments over the last 26 years, more so in the last so-called, say, starting from 2002, when you went to study, trying to study law for the first time there at university, you've been given the criminal treatment, the communist treatment, and even an MB slaves treatment. And it was all because of this couple, the computer course set up. And it looks like Mr. Prick, Dr. Tavi Talipine, is probably the most dangerous MMP KKK associate that I know to exist even now. As I speak to you all. You know why? Well, because he could persuade anybody in the system. He could access anything in the system of this country. That's great. The man is too powerful, but too manipulative. But I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah. The fact that he is actually an associate of the MMB and KKK. So if he committed a crime, a harmful, heinous crime back in 1996, upon this big natural noble pastor or this sovereign king, on behalf of that organization, the MMB organization, and on behalf of your rallies, then I'm afraid he's nothing more than an offender on the run, or let's say fugitive on the run. And I wondered as well, that's great. So the agreement was he could enjoy all his privileges as a member of the elite, because now he's got a doctorate. He's now got the title of Dr. Tavi Talipine or Atua as well, with the chief title in front of it. But the one thing that he mustn't do was never to register his details, whether it be his names or his address, or his job description. That's great, or job occupation. Inside the electoral roll, in fact, his details, strangely enough, I think after what happened, maybe after 1996, or maybe around about 2001, 2003, after what happened to you at the university and what happened to the police, the lockup, all of a sudden, Atua, Dr. Tavi Talipina's details, or Mr. Prick in my kingdom, under my so-called natural clergyman's description, his details, his telephone details, suddenly was no longer registered in the phone book. That's great. So that's the other indicator to anybody out there that if a gang member, even if an associate of a heinous, notorious criminal organization in this country, suddenly, they don't register their details in a phone book, and even, on the electoral roll, then it means that he is actually part of a criminal organization, either as a member or more so as an associate. Or he has become part of the elites, and they are now doing stuff for the elites. Or in this case, not only become part of an elite, but he's now doing more, experimentation, exploitation, and studying of the victims that have been targeted by the criminal organization. What do I mean by that? What on earth do you mean by that? Well, here's how it is. If members of a criminal organization uses people, like, say, in my case, and a lot of other people that are non-members out there in the community, so that they can rise to the occasion and rise up the ranks of their criminal organization. Say, normally they would have been at the bottom of the food chain. So in order for them to earn their patches, they've got to commit a crime, depending on the person that they're going to commit the crime upon. But under the case where this couple, this woman at the computer course, the organization probably felt like they'd hit the jackpot. So I wouldn't be surprised if that couple now, because I didn't see him wearing a patch, that after the computer course where I got set up, 2001, the partner, Richard Saley, suddenly got patched. That's great. Or suddenly rose up the ranks in the organization to get more money via wins, more money from the government, or even more money from the president, or more privileges. That's great. That's how it works. That's how it works. Now, I have never been taught by any of their members, and not even by any of their associates. The stuff that I'm talking about is coming naturally because I'm an ordained natural meek natural pastor. It's coming all through me. Yeah, through the Holy Spirit. Through my gifts of prophecy, through my gifts of discernment, but through the guardian angel Samalama, Archangel Aaron, and God's Holy Spirit. Do you find that as a miracle? Do you think that's a miracle? Do you think that's incredible? That I'm the victim and I'm solving my own case and I'm going to deal with it by myself at the courts? That's great. And that I'm going to have supporters as well, anonymous people going into the police station to file their so-called, to make statements. Yes, it's going to happen. So at the moment, I'm also prophesying to you all. But I'm ministering to you all and I'm preaching to you all realistically. So the stuff I'm talking about, this is not airy theory. That's great. This is real. This is real. But also dangerous. That's great. So that means Tavi Talipine, back in his days, I remember 1996, he was still trying to finish his degree there, or he was doing maybe another degree. That's great. But he made it look like he hadn't graduated. But anyway, and he was looking for his ticket, golden ticket, to be part of the elites, by the looks of things. That's great. And I guess you were it. And I guess I was the ticket, the golden ticket, the opportunity, the good luck. That's great. So what did he do? Well, it looks like if he committed what he did on behalf of the criminal organization in 1996, and I'm talking about the sex crime, that's great, then that means he would have gone up to another rank. He would have gone up to another rank. And he probably would have become part of the elites, and he was promised and he was given more money than he had ever wished. That's correct. Right? Not only to achieve his dream of, doing a doctorate at Victoria University, but also completing it and getting everything else. So all his wishes and dreams could be, fulfilled and made come true. That's correct. If he did what they told him to do, if he did what he was told. So the agreement was he could be part of the elites. He could get his doctorate degree. He could get anything he wanted from the people of Aotearoa in this country and the people of this, as long as this victim was going to be targeted, used and abused and exploited, and as long as the evils and the harms were going to be inflicted and continued on upon my meek royal household. That's great. Can you imagine how evil that is? Then in order for him to enjoy his privileges, that's great, among the elites and even in the academia, then this is so-called, the person that I befriended, that's great, or the victim back in 1996, that I was to suffer for the last 26 years. Now, is that right? Is that even, it is so cruel. I know, it is cruel. I never asked to be a slave to anybody. That's great. And I never signed up to be a slave to a criminal organization, to a prison gang organization, not even to a KKK organization, and not even to your rallies that are evil, let alone your cousin side of the family. But it seems like everybody was aiming to try and convert you to a slave of some sort. And they even tried to convert you to a sex slave, which they couldn't even achieve because, well, I'm an academic. I'm a noble, but I'm meek. That's great. And everything I do is meekness. But for them to try and give you the rubbish, that's great. And use you for what they could get out. And they're just bloody commoners, rat bags and criminals. Man, they certainly deserve the bullet to the head, to the third eye. That's great. And they thought that what I'm talking about is lies? Are you serious? That's great. And they thought it was a joke when I said I was going to file my restraining order against such a criminal organization. Except I hope that after you've listened to every video that I've been, every preaching that I posted, I think you're going to get the gist. That's great. What it's like to be a victim of torture. What it's like to be a victim that's been targeted by a criminal organization. What it's like to be ignored in a system. And what it's like to feel, to endure cruelty of the most heinous type. That's correct. And what it's like to be let down by the government of New Zealand, by your community, and even by your church community, and even by the people of your Samoan community, the rest of the Pākehā community as well, and especially the Māori community. I mean, it's just ridiculous. That's great. I bet you none of you would have known that if I hadn't lived at this address, I probably would never have been able to solve my case. That's great. But I tell you this, I bet you didn't know either, that during the slavery time, 400 years there in America, that they had breeding farms. They had breeding farms. Farms where black slaves were being produced or, say, cultivated and even, forced into, to breed, to produce so-called children to be sold. That's correct. So young girls, as young as by the age of 13, you would have been pregnant with your first child, first baby. That's correct. But by the age of 20, you would have had 6 children. And you don't have a choice because you're nothing more than just a commodity and a chattel. That's correct. So you were used in the breeding farm in America during slavery time by the white nigger merely for the purpose of producing children. That's correct. Giving birth to children that were, and the cycle continued on. So you see how, girls were expected to have their first baby at the age of 13. I know, that's cruel. That is cruel. What if they don't want to have sex, and what if they don't want to produce their first child? That's correct, at that age. Man, that would be considered as, that's correct, that would be rape. But also, well, they didn't have much choice. That's correct. That was the so-called their purpose. So can you imagine now how New Zealand is so lame, so ignorant, but so shallow and so racist and arrogant as well, but so evil? Why did I need to even touch base and talk about that issue? Because that was something that I also pick up here at this address, that there are such farms here, breeding farms here in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But they've been run, just like with the six slave rings in New Zealand, they've been run since the 1962s. Since the establishment of this criminal organization, they've been around, they've been doing it in secret. That's correct. So in other words, teenagers in every criminal organization here in New Zealand, they're probably expected by the age of 15 to have sex, to have their first sexual experience. That's correct. But also their first time to have children. That's correct. So by that age, they should be ready. By 16, they are pregnant. That's correct. In other words, here in New Zealand, they do actually have breeding farms in the criminal organization. So that's another mystery why there are so many. Why there's over 70 criminal organizations in your country is because you have breeding farms. And that is why the population of Aotearoa, or the Maoris in this country, increased up to 800,000. So majority of the Maoris in this country were used by racist, arrogant white niggers for the purpose of breeding farms. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've actually been selling, slaves over the years like hotcakes in other countries. That's correct. Say, for example, like Russia or Northern Eastern Europe, and even in Africa or in other countries where they wanted a nice-looking slave or a nice-looking bird that was actually a slave or a sex slave from this country. And they probably would have wanted babies from this country, but it came from a criminal organization. Now, that is sad. That is really sad. That's correct. To have to come to that realization, but to know that New Zealand actually have breeding farms. Or you all be very careful now. That's correct. Because your daughters and sons could be kidnapped and could be abducted. That's correct. And stolen by the white niggers and the brown niggers for the purpose of breeding. Especially if you have especially if you have German descent. That's correct, especially Germans. Can you imagine that the police force in New Zealand, some of their protocols are Nazi protocols. That's correct. That's what I've discovered. But I think they're military. I actually think they're more military protocols. Now, you all take care. And the last part I want to add is that when you come to court, because I'm a victim at the moment, by the way, a victim that's been targeted by a criminal organization that happens to be the majority also of Maoris are in that criminal organization, but also there is the racist, arrogant white niggers who are in the form of KKK that are also part of that organization. And that is, a lot of you, if you happen to be a victim and you don't know that you are a victim, that you've been targeted to be exploited and studied and used by a criminal organization, if you come to court that's great, to deal with a, say, one willful trespass charge or some sort of charge, what do you suppose would happen to you? There you are. You might be educated. You might have two, degrees, two, university degrees. You might be very qualified, but what's going to undermine your intelligence, but your preparations as well, if you're going to self-represent yourself? Well, if the president is able to overrule the dictate, meaning from a criminal organization like KKK or MMB, they're going to overrule your decision making, overrule the outcome that you want to manifest during your court hearing. And they could also, so that means they can overrule anything that you want to have, take place, manifest inside the courts via the New Zealand police, by any members of the police force that are dealing with your case, and even the prosecutor and even the judge. So that is the problem of those organizations targeting people like you. I mean, I've got 2 degrees. Before all those things happened to me, I was very much educated. And you can see right now, that's great, that I'm an academic person. I'm an educated person. I know how to search things. I know how to prepare my own documents. I know how to write stuff up. I know how to collect evidence. That's great. Collect stuff, paperwork. I don't even need anybody to help me. And I don't need an advocate or any other Pākehā who's a commoner to speak on my behalf. That's correct. But can you see why people like that who are commoners and criminals don't have a right to overrule people like me? That's correct, inside the courts. Because then I would want to go to war with them, or I would want to take them out or put them to death. That's correct. Because I wear a crown. I'm a head, not a tail. So I don't ever want a tail to dictate to me and to try and overrule, that's correct, or deny me my privileges. But I can understand now why my privileges were always denied. That's correct. Because of those two, that couple. And because of Mr. Prick as well, or Dr. Tavi Talibini. That's correct. And your cousin side of the family, this criminal organization, had no rights from the beginning, from the outset, to ever target our family. That's correct. Let alone you, who's now having to speak up. That's correct. And stand out, and be a voice not only to my deceased, meek, noble dad. That's correct. But I have to be a voice, being the eldest, be a voice for my entire family. 7 of us. That's correct. And even be a voice for my mother, because my mother is too weak and she's not strong and she doesn't have any qualifications, university qualifications from the university to kind of say that she's got that integrity to back her up. That's great. And on top of that, she doesn't have any angels, like a guardian angel or an archangel that I've got to back me up and hold me up. That's correct. But you got the nerve, people. And I came here at the age of 10, and I've been here 40 odd years. And he still giving me the so-called, the black slave treatment and the black nigger treatment and the coconut treatment at the same time. And yet deep down somewhere in my brain, in my meek brain, and somewhere in my DNA, there is the German part, the Pākehā part that says, you know what, you ought not to put up with that nonsense. You ought to tell them to go to hell. That's correct. So I don't ever want some ratbag, let alone some overdue offenders, to dictate to my cases or my privileges inside the courts of New Zealand. So my plea is to wrap up this preaching to every judges in the judiciary branch who adjudicates, that's correct, in Aotearoa New Zealand any courts, especially Chief Justice Matthew Palmer, and the judge that I was dealing with, the Indian Pākehā judge, that I was dealing with in terms of Deborah Johnson's one willful trespass charge that's still pending, that I've still got to attend a defendant hearing on the 30th of January 2023. Please do not apply any criminal harmful protocols that are from the MMP or the KKK criminal organizations, please don't apply their protocols to me. I don't need it. I am not an MMP member, and I'm not an MMP associate, nor am I an MMP slave. Please don't do that. You undermine my intelligence, my Pacquiao side, my full royal side. That's great. You're going to undermine me. I never grew up in any criminal organization for as long as I live. But you're going to undermine my intelligence, my Pacquiao intelligence, with some contaminated, low-life, indigenous intelligence. Oh, no, stop there. Stop there right now. The Judiciary Branch of New Zealand, please do not overrule any of my decision-making inside your courts, let alone my rights to speak on my behalf. That's correct. By applying some Maori indigenous, contaminated criminal harmful protocols, nothing to do with being all my royal household. Nothing. I want my full privileges as a white Pacquiao in this country, as a German Pacquiao, and even as a Scottish Pacquiao. I demand it. I demand for my full privileges, even as an educated person with 2 degrees. Let alone one is enough. That's correct. And other special privileges. So don't you dare apply any satanic, demonic, depraved bullshit with me. That's correct. That's because my preaching style is so bold and abrasive. Don't mean that I'm suddenly a gang member now. Oh my God, please don't. My ancestors were bold, all right? And they were very outspoken, and they did not take any nonsense from any commoners. So please don't even go there. Let me speak the way that I ought to speak, with authority inside your courts. But I don't want any judges to be overruled by the Minister of Justice, let alone the Prime Minister of New Zealand, let alone the government of New Zealand, not if they are evil and devious and despicable. And not if they didn't stand for righteousness, let alone justice, which is the very throne, which is the very values that are right next to the throne of my God. I don't want your arbitrary dictatorships. I don't want anything from the people of Aotearoa. That's correct. So I hope what? Yeah, take the moment to listen to my preachings. It's hard going, and it's hard for you to digest what I'm preaching about, because none of you ever endured anything that I'm talking about. That's correct. That a lot of you are not even, quite in my situation at the moment. Anyway, have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you for lending your ears and your hearts. Maybe not your hearts, but thank you for lending your attentions and your ears and your senses. And like I said, when you think about it, have a good think about over the Christmas, because my restraining order might be filed on the 4th of January or the first week of January. That's correct, next year. You've got all that time to take the time to listen to my preachings and then make up your minds which side you want to be on. Satan's side, or the treaty partnership, treaty people side, the God of idolatry, or you want to be on God's side, Jesus' side, or Queen Snow Brown's side. Take the time during the holiday season to have a good think about, what you're going to do next year. Make a statement down at the police station and turn a new leaf over. That's correct. Or, keep on going downhill. That's correct. Instead of uphill. Because I choose life, and I choose to go uphill instead of downhill. That's correct. Right. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.